Hey, everybody, Brian Davis here, along with Danny and Kirk from the Austin American-Statesman, and we're here for another Longhorn Confidential. And guys, we saw a pretty good football game on Saturday. Texas was on the losing end of it, but still, Alabama 20, Texas 19, a terrific effort by the Horns, which, look, let's be honest, not many people thought that they were going to be able to play as well as they did, but they did. And there's a lot of things that have come out of this game, but real quickly, I want to start with get both your thoughts before we get into quarterback issues. Danny, you go first. What'd you think of Saturday?
And you can't be upset if you're a Texas fan. I mean, obviously, Steve was a little chesty in his post-game press conference with nobody believed in us. Y'all didn't believe in us. That little speech he gave, which is true, but at the same time, I don't think anyone in the media was wrong for thinking Alabama, the number one team in the country, was going to beat Texas. I think people probably may have thought that score was going to be a lot more lopsided, and Texas definitely went toe to toe against one of the best teams in the country, even though Alabama slipped a spot or two in the polls. So, I mean, if you're Texas, you want to be a little careful with the whole moral victory tour, but there's definite things that you can take from that game. There's definite confidence boost you can take from that game, and let's face it. I mean, if number 3 doesn't get hurt, we could be talking about a whole different scenario right now because Texas. Quinn was carving up that Alabama defense, and once he got hurt, Alabama definitely did better. Although Texas had scoring opportunities, it just kind of limited the damage, and this game could have been completely different. But as I'm sure Texas fans know, I mean the 2009 comparisons have been made enough over the past couple of days. I mean, coulda, woulda, shoulda doesn't count in football, so it is what it is. But you take that game, you move forward, and we'll see what happens with UTSA. But Saturday was definitely a good stepping stone for this Texas program.
Kirk, you've been here as long as the dinosaurs walked the earth. Was that one of the best games you've seen at Royal Memorial?
Absolutely. It's probably, I know for sure it's top 10, but
Right.
you got to follow this under best loss in school history, right? Considering the expectations. But like Danny said, you look in those standings, it says one loss tie. There's no MV for moral victory. So Texas needs to get off that stance very quickly. And I think because this is not just a trap game, it's a game against a very good team. And I know Sarkisian knows that. I mean, they won 12 games. UTSA won 12 games last year, and off to a good start. 1-1, won in overtime, lost in triple overtime. Could have very well been 2-0. So, but they need to quit scheduling Alabama because they keep losing. They keep getting their quarterbacks beat up. So they need to tell Greg Sankey, hey, we want to play Alabama maybe once every 10 years.
Well,
But yeah,
that was what we did when we got to interview Greg Sankey in the press box on
right.
Saturday. I think one of us mentioned that. Say, hey, Alabama is leaving the league, right? I mean, it's because Texas is going to dominate all. No, totally kidding. Incredible environment, incredible game. Hats off to the Longhorns for what they did do. But you're right, Texas is not in the moral victory business, nor should they be this week or this few days afterwards. But let's get to this UTSA game because there are some major questions coming in. Least of all, who's going to play quarterback? We know that Quinn Ewers is out with a clavicle sprain, most likely going to be several weeks, depending on your what reports you believe. It could be 4 weeks, it could be 6 weeks. I'm just going to say multiple games at this point. And then Hudson Card has an ankle issue, as we saw on the 20-yard scramble, very gimpy, but he wasn't coming out of that game. So I guess my question to either one of you is that are we going to see Hudson on Saturday against the Roadrunners, or is it time to see if Texas has the right stuff with Austin High product Chuck Wright?
I'm betting Hudson Card shows up. I don't know about you two, but he played on that bad ankle, and yeah, it's easier to play, in the heat of the moment than maybe days or a week later. But this is his window of opportunity again. He got the starting job to start last year. It lasted 7 quarters before he gave way to Casey Thompson. So I think he's going to do everything in his power, to be under center or behind center come Saturday night. So that said, Sark made it clear Malik Murphy, isn't riding in on a white stallion. He's not healthy. He didn't go into it with his leg injury that needed surgery after his last senior
And
year.
he wanted no part of explaining that, did he?
Oh, he didn't really want to explain anything. When we asked him, who was taking first team snaps, that's for me. So I think we're seeing a little feistier Sark. I wish he'd lose the "we ran out of time" thing. I would dispense with that, but I bet we'd see Hudson Card, and you know what? It'd be smart to use Charles Wright some because
Agreed.
Hudson Card's just one injury away from Charles Wright. This show is yours.
Yeah, I'd imagine Hudson starts. I mean, unless his ankle fell off between the Alabama game and now, I don't think you're going to take that young man out of the game. He was pretty defiant's not the right word, but after the game, he pretty much said that there was no way he wasn't finishing that Alabama game. But if Hudson can't go, I think that's when things get interesting because Charles Wright is technically the next guy up on the depth chart, but would Texas do something where Charles is the guy running the 2-minute offense, the guy you want in obvious passing situations, but Roschon's running the Wildcat 20 times a game? It'd be really interesting to see if Hudson can't go, and if Quinn goes. To be fair, Steve was pretty defiant on that too. According to him, Quinn's day to day, even though there's reports out that he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks or whatever. But if those two guys can't go, I'd be interested to see, hey, does Roschon take over a bigger share of this offense, maybe you throw it a little bit, do a lot of Wildcat, or would this be completely the Charles Wright or maybe Ben Ballard show, or how exactly they would scheme that offense? Because I don't believe it would be completely Charles Wright. I believe they would have a role for your senior captain, former high school 4-star quarterback to take some of that burden off.
Absolutely. And one other thing that should be mentioned too, while we're talking about injuries and who might play in the backfield, Bijan Robinson did have a shoulder issue, but he came to media availability on Monday. He said his plan is to practice midweek and basically play in the game Saturday. I asked him if all he needed was to rub some dirt on it, and he says, yeah, just stop being a wimp, right? And so, I think Bijan is a super tough dude, as we know. Especially coming off his elbow last year. He wants to maximize every chance he gets. So I expect that we'll see Bijan on Saturday. Do either one of you think that's wrong?
No, I mean, he hadn't had a 100-yard rushing game yet, shockingly. Right. Of course, that Alabama front is pretty tough. So, but no, I think in his whole answers to us yesterday, I think he thinks he's definitely planning on play. And let me say this on Quinn Ewers. I'm more encouraged by the whole day-to-day, and maybe that's just coach speak, but the fact that, in the past, he said, well, he did this, he hurt this, surgery. They said no surgery, nothing broken, nothing structural. But I think the fact that he used the terms day-to-day for Quinn Ewers and all of them, and it's his left shoulder, it's not his right shoulder on his throwing side, leads me to believe it could end up being a pain tolerance thing. And I kind of get the impression maybe we'll see him before 4 weeks. Maybe we'll see him by Oklahoma game.
Yeah, if Bijan showed up to press on Tuesday, or on Monday, whatever day we do press availabilities, he's playing. I mean, he showed up post game, kind of shrugged off the questions about his shoulder. He was pretty, he was in a good mood and joking. Not that anyone would ever suggest that he's a wimp, but that he was joking about that. Brian, I think you're the one who suggested he should rub some of his mustard on it. He thought that was a good marketing opportunity. So I think if he's out here joking with us and they let him come to availability, unless something goes completely wrong between here and Saturday, he's playing. Now, they may not run him 20 times, but I would imagine he's going to be out there.
Well, to be fair, Anwar Richardson of Orange Bloods is the one who said, hey, once you rub some mustard on it. But I like the fact that Bijan, the marketer, said, hey. Never miss an opportunity, man.
Medicinal
Never miss a marketing chance, ever.
Right. Many
ever.
Mustard, right?
I know. Exactly. But to build on Danny's point, absolutely. Texas does not make players available to reporters that are going to be out or injured or anything like that. The fact that Bijan was allowed to come talk to us was a big sign. Let's talk about UTSA a little bit. We all three of us know Jeff Traylor, the Fighting Trailers that are going to be coming out of San Antonio. Jeff Traylor was an assistant at Texas under Charlie Strong, a Gilmer coaching legend, an East Texas high school coaching legend. He knows every coach and every place to get a chicken fried steak in this state. There's no doubt about it. And to deny what he has done at UTSA would be just wrong. I mean, he's done an incredible job, I think, with UTSA, getting them ready to where, Danny, I'll start with you on this one. These guys are coming in here as 13.5-point dogs, just under 2 touchdowns. Now, granted, I bet the Texas injury quarterback situation has a lot to do with that. But the fact that odds makers think they're going to come in here and hang tough is a big sign for UTSA, I think.
Yeah, and I think I think it's that line makes me wonder a little bit. Last week Texas got to play that role of the underdog. Nobody believes in us. Yada yada yada. Now they're the hunted. UTSA gets to play that role. I think Jeff. I wasn't on his conference call, but I saw some quote he said. Someone told him the line. He was like, "Oh, so that little." So I think they get to come in and play that role. I mean, they know what it is. I mean, Texas is definitely the big brother in this situation. So I'm sure they're gunning. There's some local kids on that team, some Central Texas kids, and they're going to have family in the stands, and they're going to want to have probably the biggest chance that they're going to have to show that this UTSA program and help put it on the map. They obviously did a lot of that last year, but this would be a huge statement. They came into Texas, came into Royal Memorial, and came out with a win. So, I mean, obviously they're going to come out fired up. I don't think anyone in that Texas locker room, at least if the players we talked to yesterday are a fair sample size, are going to be overlooking this UTSA program. I think Bijan may have said yesterday, or one of the players said that, we're used to being everyone's Super Bowl, but we need to treat UTSA like they're a Super Bowl game. And a couple, Keandre Coburn, duly noted that this was the best team in Texas last year based off of what they accomplished in record and stuff. So I think, UTSA may be a, 2-score dog in this game, but I don't think anyone in that Texas locker room is going to treat it like that. And, I think it'd be foolish if any fan is expected to blow it. Blow it may happen, but I think this is a fair game. And if Texas doesn't bring their A game, we could be talking a whole other story next week when we reconvene.
Don't you think he's going to be distracted by negotiations with Nebraska to become their next head coach?
Wow.
I tell you, he's the hot name. He's the hot name now. Whether he'd be hot enough to get a job like that, I don't know. I don't even know.
He has a better job right now than Nebraska.
I was about to say the same thing. I'm not sure Nebraska's a good job anymore. It's like the most irrelevant program in the country almost. So, but yeah, you got to love Jeff Traylor. I was on that conference call yesterday, and he said, "Well, I'm not sure the best team won Saturday up at Royal Memorial Stadium, and Kelvin Banks is going to be a first-round draft pick, and they got so many 4 stars and 5 stars. We'll be lucky to compete." So he was feeding into the rat poison. So,
yep.
But yeah, what would this do for his career in UTSA? Oh my God! It's a program that started. What was it? 2012. Texas has been playing a G in years, and I'm not saying they're on even terms, but hey, UTSA won 12 last year. Texas won 5. So I think UTSA is going to give them all they want.
All I know is that a flagship school, or at least a school that purports to be a flagship school of the great state of Texas, would never let a low-level team like a Conference USA team or a Sun Belt team come into your house and administer a beatdown. That would never happen to a university of the first class or any school in this state that claims to be a flagship institution, would it?
No, and they never lose to Kansas either, right?
Well, okay. No,
I'm
setting you up for an A&M joke there, Kirk. I'm setting you up for an Aggie joke. Right?
That's not where you're going. This is
but yes, Texas has lost to Kansas. There's no question about that. So Texas fans, we probably need to keep it inside for
But
right now.
UTSA, they were the best team in the state of Texas. I guess I don't know. Maybe Baylor could argue that. Baylor won the conference in the Sugar Bowl, but Baylor and UTSA were the best two teams in the state of Texas last year. So Frank Harris is legit. He's the real deal, dual threat quarterback. Been Conference USA Player of the Week twice now. He's thrown over 300 yards every game. I think it was 359 against Army. He's got 6 passing touchdowns, which I think ranks him 10th in the nation. They got 3 great receivers. They got a good running back to replace Sincere McCormick. I think they got some issues in the offensive line, but boy, will that UTSA team be motivated. Jeff
Absolutely.
see to
Absolutely.
that.
I did want us to touch on I don't want to go into everything about the Alabama game because it's the past now. But the one thing that I did want to talk about is the Texas defense. Kirky wrote about this on Monday. Danny's addressed this a couple times. But can we just stop for a second and just say what an impressive step up in weight class that they had and they performed. Jalen Ford was all over the place. Anthony Cook was all over the place. It felt like great closing speed, great swarm tackling. How much did Gary Patterson influence this? We're not sure yet, but he had something to do with it. And I just thought that is the standard that they're going to have to be playing with going forward. That to me is what I would hope that if I'm a Texas fan, I want to see that level of intensity again on Saturday.
Yeah, week in, week out, absolutely. Weren't y'all a little surprised he didn't give Kwiatkowski more love on Monday? He didn't. I don't think he mentioned his name. He just talked about the defensive staff and stuff.
Well, I don't think he didn't. But he hasn't mentioned any assistant coach.
Well, I mean that defense. They were 100th in the nation last year. Now they're 50th, and they held Alabama to 20 points. I mean, I can't believe he didn't call out Kwiatkowski a little bit because you asked him about Gary Patterson Saturday, and I don't know if he bristled, but he didn't want to.
He wanted no part of that. He did not want to be giving Gary Patterson credit.
But yeah, I mean, the defense, they got so much more talent now. They can rotate their defensive line. Jalen Ford, who you mentioned, he's a beast. Demo is really playing at the top of his game, and the secondary is so much better. I mean, Anthony Cook and Gilbo and Jameer Johnson come in and replaces Deshaun Jameson. I mean, they've got a lot more talent in that secondary than they've had for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I would not read too much in him not shouting out PK. I mean, I think part of that's we need to do a better job of asking about PK because he wasn't asked about any questions about
that's true
any specific coordinator or coaches. I mean, last week when in the lead up to the game, he gave a pretty good answer when asked about Jeff Banks. He on the Thursday press conference, he was asked about Gary and gave an answer about that. I think he has a little bit of a tightrope to walk with Gary and what questions he answers about him because if he goes and waxes poetically about Gary and the impact he's having, he has to go back in that coach's room and see Pete. So his answers to that don't necessarily surprise me. And once again, I think if we want answers about PK, we need to ask the questions. But yeah, this was a good defensive performance, and we'll see how that goes because once again, if Frank Harris goes out there this weekend and carves them up for 300 yards and 4 passing touchdowns,
his defense will be terrible.
Yeah, we're going to be, PK is going to be back on the chopping block, and we're going to wonder why, Gary Patterson, speaking of him, isn't running this defense. So, it's, fame is fleeting, and we have a very short attention span, and so it's what have you done for me lately? And Alabama was great, lots of confidence, but now you got to do it against a good UTSA quarterback. Now you're going to have to do it against a resurgent Tech team next week, and so on and so forth. So we'll see if this defense that we saw, if that's a new Texas defense, or if there's a slip up. But obviously they impressed a lot of people and showed that when everything is clicking and everything is going right, this defense can play with the best teams, and that's something we needed to know because after that ULM game, they looked good, but it was ULM. But they put together 2 really good performances back to back.
And Danny, if you could touch on this too, because you wrote specifically about Bert Auburn. Are we ready to say that Texas has found their kicker? after his performance. The kick at the end of the first half was partially blocked by Will Anderson, so that's a little bit of a blocking issue. Had to snap and hold issue, but that kick was blocked. But then Bert Auburn was money at the end and gave Texas the go-ahead points there before Alabama. Do you think Bert Auburn is the guy?
For now, sure. I mean, it's one, kicking is also one of those things where it's what have you done for me lately? And that's the good thing about this Texas roster is they have a kid on scholarship who is backing up Bert Auburn. So, Bert's going to have competition and he's going to have to go out there and prove it, week to week. But obviously, he's 5 for 7 this season. His 2 misses, you could blame more on the holder than you can blame on him, especially against ULM. And then, even though that was blocked, but it wasn't the best snap, wasn't the best hold. And
that was a hold issue.
Anderson is a complete freak and got in there and made a spectacular play. Although I still think he has not been credited for that block yet, which is weird on the official stat sheet. But yeah, Bert going out there hitting a 49-yard field goal. Kirk would know better than me, but that has to be up there with one of the greatest kicks ever in that stadium. Obviously, Justin Tucker, Cameron Dicker, Dusty Mangum, but those were all away from Austin. So that was one of the best kicks ever in that stadium. Huge stakes, and unfortunately, it didn't hold up as the game winner. But Texas fans had to be confident. That was a big question mark going into the season and after fall camp. And he's looked really well. But once again, it's a long season. If he goes out and misses 2 next week, people are going to be calling for Will Stone's name. So he's going to have to keep it up. But obviously, great start to his career and his run as a Texas kicker. And Texas fans at least have to feel confident first time he goes out there on Saturday that he's going to make it regardless of the distance.
Yeah, I mean, that was like 1 yard short of the 50-yarder Phil Dawson kicked into the win against Virginia, opposite end zones. But yeah, that's just a tremendous kick under great pressure. So I was one of those really worried about the special teams this year because, all 3 jobs were open, but Daniel Trejo is, I didn't like Isaac Pearson. He had some ugly punts in August. And Daniel Trejo, 61-yarder, and then he had another like 49-yarder right after that was really instrumental on Saturday. But Bert Auburn's more than lived up to any billing and any expectations he has. And you're right, Danny, they should take away that one block because even Fox showed it. Will Anderson getting a hand on the blocked field goals. So I think for now they've answered that question. So they've answered a lot of questions now. They just got to keep people healthy. That would help.
Well, Texas certainly has answered a lot of questions about itself, with this, as well it did against Alabama, but now more crazy questions remain about the health of the quarterbacks going forward. I still think we're going to see Quinn Ewers probably. Let's check back in around Oklahoma. Let's see where number 3 is at that point. But I'm with you guys. I think we'll see Hudson Card on Saturday with a little bit of Charles Wright and some Wildcat from Roshan and maybe even Bijan.
And a whole lot of mustard.
A whole lot of mustard, exactly. Available at Central Market, I'm told. Real quickly, does Texas have any worries this weekend?
Yeah, they always have worries, especially when you have quarterback health and a really good team coming in. I think they've got enough that I don't know about covering the spread or not, but I think Texas really kind of needs to win by 10 points or 17 points and, not, cut it so close because you're playing a Conference USA team. It's not a Big 12 team, which starts next week in Lubbock.
Or a Sun Belt team, thank the Lord.
Well, yeah, you don't want those on the schedule. So, yeah, shout out to the Aggies once more. But I expect Texas to take care of business this year because, the alternative is like, oh, my God, you got up 1 week for Alabama, and that was it. You got to play 12 games. So, yeah.
I don't think Texas needs to win by double digits or 17. They just need to win. I mean, we just came off a week in college football where the Sun Belt is knocking off every major program in the country. We were just at a game where a team that was supposed to lose by 20 points had a lead with 90 seconds left over the number 1 team in the country. I mean, winning, to borrow a phrase from our good friend and I guess colleague now in the journalism business, winning's hard, and Texas just needs to not lose. Like if they win by a touchdown, if they win by 31, it's going to matter the exact same on Monday when their record gets flashed up against the Texas Tech record. So I'm not, if it's a thrilling game, if it's a blowout and we're all riding by halftime, I don't think it really matters one way or the other. This is a good UTSA team. This is not a ULM team that's picked to finish last in their conference. Texas just needs to win and not worry about style points or point spreads or margins. They just need to not get an L. That's all that matters on Saturday.
And they're a ranked team now, ranked team.
That's right. Ranked number 21 in the country. That's where I've been all along, is that as long as you are 3-0 or 2-1 going to Tech, you're fine. You're totally fine. Right. That's where they are. And that's where we are going to leave it for right now. This episode of Longhorn Confidential, for Kirk and Danny and Cedric, who is in absentia today. We appreciate you reading all the weekend. Great numbers from everybody reading our coverage this past weekend of the Alabama game. We really do appreciate that. Remember to stay with the Statesman all season long for all the great coverage and content. But for now, I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next time.